Hey, everyone, ever feel like you're trying to navigate life with like a hazy trail map, if you even have a map at all?
Or maybe you've got the map, but it's for the wrong terrain altogether.
Totally. And then you're stuck wondering how to even end up here.
Yeah.
So today we're diving into something ancient, yeah, but surprisingly relevant to that feeling of being lost. The Eightfold Path.
And no, before you click away picturing monks on a mountaintop, I promise this is about finding clarity and direction right here, right now, amidst the chaos of your life.
Exactly. Think of it like this. We're cracking open excerpts from Lesson 2, The Eightfold Path, which acts as a roadmap to, hopefully, a less stressful, more meaningful life.
Yeah.
And who couldn't use a bit more of that, am I right?
It's interesting, because people often misunderstand the Eightfold Path. They think it's a super rigid set of rules, when really it's more like a flexible framework for making choices that actually align with what you really care about with your values.
Okay, I love that. A framework, not some ironclad rule book.
Exactly, yeah.
And speaking of frameworks, our source uses this really vivid metaphor of a dense forest.
Yeah.
Like it's so easy to feel lost, overwhelmed, like you're just wandering in circles out there.
Right, like you're going in circles. And this path, the Eightfold Path, it's like that trail that's been blazed by those who've come before us. They're marking the way.
Yeah, they're saying, hey, we've been lost here too, and this is how we found our way out.
And you listening right now, you are so not alone in feeling lost or confused. It's like this universal human challenge. And this path, it acknowledges that right from the very beginning.
Yeah, it really does. We all crave those signposts, especially when life gets messy and confusing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know when some people hear Eightfold Path, they kind of tune out. They think it's about achieving some perfect, like unattainable version of goodness.
Oh yeah, I've been there. Like suddenly I'm supposed to be levitating and radiating pure light. It's a lot of pressure.
Right. But our source, they make it really clear. This isn't about some idealized version of ourselves. It's about understanding reality as it actually is.
Yeah.
Like right here, right now.
Exactly. It's about seeing clearly, without all that judgment or wishful thinking. And that actually leads us to that very first step on the path, right view.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. Our source compares right view to having a map before you even start climbing a mountain. So
Yeah.
you see the terrain, you anticipate those challenges, maybe even spot a few scenic overlooks worth hiking towards.
And in the context of the Eightfold Path, understanding the Four Noble Truths, that is the map. But it's not just about like knowing them intellectually. It's about letting them actually impact how you live your life.
Right, because information without application is not very useful.
Yeah.
So just as a bit of a refresher, the Four Noble Truths, they essentially boil down to this. 1, suffering exists as a part of life. 2, that suffering, it's got a cause, and a lot of times that cause is our own doing. Like we're clinging to things staying the same when, let's face it, change is inevitable.
It's like we want that feeling of control, so we grip even tighter, but it just makes the whole thing more painful.
Exactly, yeah. 3, there is a way to end that suffering. And 4, the path to ending it is, you guessed it, this very eightfold path we're exploring.
And here's where it gets really interesting, okay? Most of us, we fixate on the problems, right? On the suffering, without ever really believing that solutions even exist.
Oh, that's so true.
Yeah.
We get stuck in the problem and forget to look for the solution.
Yeah. This first step, right view, it's about fundamentally shifting that mindset. It's recognizing that freedom from suffering, true inner peace, it's possible, but you have to believe it to see it.
It's like that saying, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right.
100%. Right view is about choosing to see that possibility, even amidst all the difficult stuff.
It's about deciding to focus on that possibility, that potential, instead of getting bogged down by the muck and the mire.
Precisely. And once you've got that clear, honest vision, that's when you can really start to, set your compass in the right direction. And that brings us naturally to step 2, right intention, not just what we do, but the why behind our actions.
Now, this is where it starts to get really practical, don't you think? Because we can all relate to just, going through the motions without really connecting to any deeper purpose.
Oh, for sure. Like just operating on autopilot, right?
Exactly. And I love this analogy that our source uses. Imagine a farmer, and they're preparing the soil before planting, right? They're not just scattering seeds all over the place. They're tilling, they're fertilizing, they're creating the conditions for a really bountiful harvest.
And that is key, right? Intention is about cultivating fertile ground, right, for our actions to really take root and grow. It's an ongoing process, weeding out those harmful intentions like greed or jealousy, and then nurturing the beneficial ones like kindness and compassion.
So it's really an active process, this cultivation. It's about making conscious choices about what seeds we're planting in the gardens of our minds. And our source actually mentions 3 specific intentions: renunciation, goodwill, and harmlessness.
And those 3, they might sound a little, I don't know, old-fashioned or something, but when you really think about them, they're all about creating the conditions for a more peaceful life, more fulfilling, both for ourselves and for everyone around us.
It's about recognizing that our inner world, it directly impacts the world outside. It's all connected, right?
Exactly. It's that ripple effect. And speaking of which, our words, they're like those ripples too. Which brings us to the 3rd step. Right speech.
Okay, so let's talk about how our words factor into all of this. Because our source paints this really vivid picture of words as seeds, which I love that imagery.
Oh, me too. It's so powerful.
Because it really drives home how what we say, it can have this ripple effect, impacting not just ourselves, but everyone around us.
And it's not just about avoiding the obviously harmful stuff like lying or gossiping, though, that's definitely a part of it.
Of course, yeah.
Right. Speech is also about being mindful of our tone, choosing kindness, even when it's difficult. And sometimes, actually, even more importantly, it's about knowing when to speak up and when silence is actually the most skillful response.
Knowing when to just listen.
Exactly.
Speaking of knowing when to speak, there's this great story in the source about a monk, and he asks the Buddha how to control his anger.
Oh, I think I remember this one.
And the Buddha, instead of launching into some long lecture, he just gives him 3 simple questions to ask himself before saying anything. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary?
So simple, but so profound, right? Like, how often do we just, fire off a response without thinking?
Oh, all the time. Especially these days with social media, everything's so instant.
Right. So that pause, that moment of reflection before we hit send or reply in the heat of the moment, it can make all the difference.
It can mean the difference between, escalating a situation and actually de-escalating it.
100%.
Okay, so we've covered right view, right intention, right speech. It feels like we're building some kind of foundation here, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. We're laying the groundwork for a life that's lived with greater awareness and purpose.
Yeah.
And that leads us naturally to right action, the 4th step. This one's all about aligning our actions, our behavior in the world with those values that we've been cultivating.
So it's not just about avoiding harmful actions. It's about actively choosing to do good, making choices that benefit ourselves and others.
It's about walking the talk, living with integrity.
Exactly. And this is where I think the Eightfold Path starts to get really practical and maybe even a little bit challenging, because our source connects right action to tending a garden.
I love that analogy.
Yeah. And it's like we're each responsible for cultivating our own inner garden, for sure. But our actions, they're like the plants in our garden.
Right.
They don't just exist in isolation. They impact the garden we all share.
It's about that balance between, personal responsibility and recognizing how interconnected we all are.
Exactly. Now, I have to admit, this next step is one that I've personally wrestled with a bit. Right livelihood?
Ah, yes. The how we make a living step.
Right. It's easy to kind of brush off, to think this one only applies to certain professions. But when you really dig in,
it gets really interesting, right? Because how many of us have felt that disconnect between the work we do and our values, our sense of purpose.
Like, is this all there is?
And our source is very clear about this. How we make a living, our livelihood, it shouldn't be at odds with our ethics.
And it goes beyond just avoiding, those quote unquote bad jobs, right?
Right.
Even work that seems, ethically neutral on the surface, it can still leave us feeling drained, unfulfilled, if it doesn't resonate with our deeper values.
Yeah.
If it doesn't light us up.
It's about finding that sweet spot, that intersection between our skills, our passions, and something that feels genuinely meaningful.
Aligning our daily work with our values.
Yeah.
Which, as you can imagine, it often takes quite a bit of effort.
It does. It takes effort and persistence, and sometimes even a little bit of grit. Which brings us perfectly to step 6.
Right, effort.
And let's be honest, this one can be a bit of a practice ground for patience, wouldn't you say? It's not just a one-time push. It's about showing up consistently, even when it's tough, even when we don't feel like it. Our source compares right effort to the wind propelling a sailboat. It's not that sudden gust that gets you where you need to go. It's that consistent, ongoing energy, the kind that keeps you moving forward, even when you encounter storms or the wind dies down completely.
It's about adjusting the sails and navigating those changing conditions.
Precisely. Yeah, it's that constant tending to the sails, to the navigation. And just like a gardener learns to discern which plants are thriving and which ones need a little extra TLC, the next two steps on the Eightfold path, they really focus our attention inward. They help us cultivate that inner strength and resilience to stay the course, even when life throws those inevitable curveballs our way.
That's about cultivating that sense of inner calm amidst the chaos, wouldn't you say?
Exactly, yeah.
Finding that center.
And that's where I think right mindfulness comes in. Although I have to admit, this is one of those concepts that tends to make people a little, I don't know, maybe a little wary.
Yeah, it can feel a little intimidating. Like they hear mindfulness and they picture, I don't know, like someone sitting cross-legged on a mountaintop, completely detached from reality.
Totally. But it's really not about that at all.
Right. But our source, they keep it refreshingly straightforward. Like there's no mystical mumbo jumbo here. Mm-hmm. Our source describes mindfulness through this really simple image of a mirror, just reflecting whatever passes in front of it. So it's about observing our thoughts, our feelings, our sensations, just without judgment, just noticing them as they arise, without getting completely swept away by them.
It's like we're acknowledging, oh, hey, there's anxiety. Thanks for letting me know. Anyway, what was I doing again?
Right. It's not about emptying our minds, which, let's be honest, most days that feels impossible.
Yeah.
But it's about changing our relationship to our thoughts, to our feelings.
Oh, 100%. It's that subtle shift in perspective that can make all the difference.
Yeah. So not getting totally carried away by every worry or frustration, but also not trying to force ourselves to think or feel a certain way. Yeah. Just observing, acknowledging, and then letting go.
Exactly. It's about creating a little bit of space, a little breathing room between ourselves and our thoughts, which when you really think about it, it's incredibly freeing.
It's like hitting the pause button on a movie.
Oh, I love that.
So we can kind of step back from the drama for a second, observe it maybe a little more objectively, and then we get to choose how we want to respond.
And our source uses another analogy that I think that I find really helpful. It's the image of a watchman at the city gates. And this watchman, they're vigilant, they're paying attention to who's coming and going, what they're carrying with them, but they're not engaging with every single person who passes by.
So we're learning to be a bit more discerning about what we let into the city of our minds, which I think circles back beautifully to right view and right intention.
It all starts to connect, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
Because if you're not careful about what we're feeding, or our minds, the news we consume, the social media we scroll through, even just the self-talk we engage in, it's going to be pretty difficult to cultivate those more positive, wholesome qualities that support our journey on this path.
It's true. We have to be mindful of our informational diet, just like we are with what we actually eat.
Right. We wouldn't expect to feel our best if we were constantly, eating junk food and never exercising.
Exactly. And
right.
Mindfulness, that ability to just observe without judgment, it really lays the groundwork for that deep inner stillness, that clarity that comes with our final step.
Right.
Concentration.
And here's where I think meditation often comes into play, wouldn't you say? Though I really appreciate that our source, they emphasize that meditation, it's not just about, zoning out or trying to escape from our thoughts. It's a practice. And it has a purpose.
Okay.
It's about cultivating a still, clear mind.
It is. It's about training the mind to become like a still pond,
Yeah.
no longer muddied by all those constant thoughts and worries. And in that stillness, that's when we're able to see things more clearly, to connect with a deeper sense of peace and wisdom.
I love that visual, that still pond. It's so much more inviting than this idea of our minds having to be completely blank, which again, let's be honest, it just feels impossible. And speaking of visuals, our source uses the analogy of an archer to explain right concentration, which I think will really resonate with our listeners.
Oh, for sure. It's such an apt analogy. The archer, through dedicated practice and focused concentration, they develop the skill to hit their target with incredible precision. And for us, that target might be It might be greater peace of mind or deeper wisdom, or maybe even just the ability to stay present with the people we love, whatever it is that we're aiming for. Well,
Right.
concentration, it gives us the focus, the clarity to actually get there.
Right. It's not about concentrating for concentration's sake. Just like the archer.
Yeah.
They're not just practicing for the fun of pulling a bowstring, right?
Yeah.
It's about cultivating that mental discipline, that focus to hit the targets that truly matter in our lives.
And that's what's so beautiful about the Eightfold Path as a whole, wouldn't you say? It's not just this checklist to be conquered. It's this set of interconnected practices that support us on this lifelong journey, you
Right.
know, of growth, of self-discovery, and yeah, even joy.
It's a journey that requires effort, for sure. But as we've been exploring, it's also a journey that's full of some pretty incredible rewards, would you say?
Oh, absolutely. Greater peace, greater clarity, and a sense of purpose that extends far beyond just our own individual lives.
It's about recognizing that interconnectedness, right? That we're all in this together.
We are.
Well, on that note, as we wrap up our deep dive today, we'll leave you with this question to kind of ponder. What's one step, however small, that you can take today to align your life, even if it's just a little bit more closely with the values, with the aspirations that we've been exploring today? Which step on the Eightfold Path it calls to you right now? Keep those questions in mind as you go about your day, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive into all the wisdom that surrounds us.
See you next time.